When we ask this question about navigating Torah in a secular society, there are actually two parts to the question. One part is practical. How do you exist in a foreign ethical system? In other words, Torah can theoretically hear statements in a vacuum, but what we have in our world is not a vacuum. We exist within a greater ethical system or value system or idea, and the question is, how do we exist in that system? And this is where you get questions of that might even border on issues of Behereg Val Yavor, okay, of saying, hey, listen, you don't have to kill yourself if the people are demanding this behavior, even though the behavior may be an avera. Maybe you do have to kill yourself, things like that. But basically, questions would arise is, when would an avera be permissible given the situation? Okay, because of the foreign value system and things of that nature. So those are practical issues, and they don't just exist within the political realm. They can exist even in more specific situations, such as, let's say, being a Hillel director. Okay, and this is not going to be something where it's like threatening or whatever, but a person wants to be a Hillel director, Orthodox person wants to be a Hillel director. But Hillel is a pluralistic Jewish environment. So, as a Hillel director, let's say you have to arrange for the same-sex dance, or you have to arrange for the Reform minyan. Okay, can you do that as a Hillel director? And these are questions that have been asked, and it's a policy decision, because if you say Orthodox people can't do it, then Orthodox people can't be Hillel directors. And that would have its policy effects. In fact, there will be no Orthodox influence on campus, unless, maybe the larger Hillels usually have a Reform, conservative, Orthodox rabbi or whatever. But those are the kind of questions that you ask. But those are practical questions. There's another side of the question. I think this question has to be addressed first, and that's the theoretical value side of the question, which we started touching upon last week. And it basically states that how do you relate to the external value system that you're in? You're operating within this external value system. And the simple answer is, well, you just, you have to follow Torah, and that's it. Okay, so it's challenging Torah, so it's irrelevant. That would seem to be the simplistic answer. So therefore, the only answer becomes the practical answer. Okay, that you have to stay with following the Torah idea for how to follow the Torah idea. But the bottom line is the external value system is basically irrelevant on the theoretical value level. That would be one answer. The other approach would say that the external value system actually may raise questions and create a dynamic. And therefore, by living in this greater system, there's actually a dynamic. And that becomes, and that's issues we talked about, because the fact is human beings themselves respond to situations outside, and therefore respond to them and so forth, and therefore questions can be raised. So the fact is once you say you are living within a greater value system, the question is that greater value system may inherently challenge you. It just by definition challenge you, but maybe there's a perspective within Torah that says it's expected to challenge you, and there's actually some type of benefit in that challenge. In other words, through your relating to the external system, it actually makes you reconsider what Torah really is saying. Okay? And that becomes the second idea. Okay, so that's what I want to focus a little bit more on tonight in terms of the broader system. And in a world such as ours, where we have, let's say, values which people basically look upon very positively, like the freedoms and things like that, we talk about that, about democracy and things of that nature. Basically, we ask the question, does Torah really respond to these things? But the point is that I'm already having a value consciousness that's positive towards those things. So what do I do with my response, okay, outside of Torah? See, what Torah is that what this really comes down to is how you look at revelation. It really touches upon the whole issue of how you look at secular studies, the whole issue of Torah Umada, Torah Derech Eretz, Torah only, and so forth. In the sense that revelation is a very specific view. Here is what God says, and you do it. That's it. Okay? And everything else can be discounted. The truth is revealed, everything else is discounted. Which is one approach. Therefore, what you want to be careful about is not in any way misreading that approach. So you want to have a pure presentation of the revealed idea, and everything else can mislead you. Okay, and in extremely right-wing religious settings, and I'm not talking about Judaism right now, but extreme right-wing religious settings, you want to protect the individual from any outside influence. You want the only influence to be the revealed influence, or this specific viewpoint, and you want nothing else happening. You don't want to raise questions. You don't want to. In fact, the questions themselves become somewhat of an issue. And that's one view of revelation. And therefore, you don't value any secular studies, because what can it add to you? There's pure revealed thought, and any secular studies can actually take away from that pure revealed thought. You know, I've been told that, for example, I have a law degree, and I've been told that my law degree most likely means that when I learn Gemara, I have a little bit of a problem, because I'm too affected by the Goyshenachas from the law. Okay, there's other people who say that having a law degree actually should make you understand certain sections of the Talmud, such as the Babas, property law, and stuff like that, in a better way, because you have input from other systems. That becomes part of this challenge. But if that's true, then you have to say, I acknowledge that there's value in this external system in terms of its relationship with Torah. Then I have to understand, so why do I need an external system to relate to Torah? Okay, so that becomes the major issue here. We live in North America. We have these freedoms. How do we look upon it? Can we say that our responses to these freedoms, our valued perceptions, has a role in our Torah thought and will affect us in understanding Torah, and then in turn affect us in how Torah goes back and affects our relationship with this external environment?
So, is that only learns from Jews or learns from the outside?
It's interesting. Is an interesting issue on Adam. It's actually a Gemara in Sanhedrin. Gemara in Sanhedrin says about learning Torah from I'm just learning this Gemara, so it's on my mind. The Gemara says, so I'm learning certain sugyas in Ben Noach laws these days with one of my sons. But the fact is that it says in the Gemara, they ask a question that you're not allowed to learn that a goy who learns Torah is chayiv misa. So the challenge is made from Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish says a goy who learns Torah is like a kohen gadol, and the verse that's quoted is a verse that uses the word Adam. It doesn't say kohen Levi Yisrael. It says Adam, and therefore you see it applies to all human beings. So the Tosfos asks a question that people explain is there's another Gemara that says that uses the word Adam, okay, and Adam seems to only apply to Jews. So there's different approaches. How do you rectify these two statements? So the one approach is that disagreement. That not everyone, like Rashi seems to say, not everyone agrees with this analysis that says Adam only means Jews. I mean, non-Jews, Reish Lakish doesn't hold like that. That's one approach. Another approach says it depends upon the context. The approach, I think, is Rabbeinu Tam's approach, is that if it says Ha'adam, it means all people. If it says Adam, if it says Adam without the Hey, it means Jews. If it says Ha'adam, it means all people. Okay, so that's an interesting question in terms of Yavis. Let me call Adam, you learn from all people. Does it mean a Jew, which would mean a kosher Jew, a Torah Jew, or would it mean, or does Adam mean there from all people? So that's a worthwhile question. But that's part of the issue in terms of the secular studies Torah issue debate as well. Okay, so what I'm going to contend first is that right off the bat there's a distinction. It's obviously my belief that there's a dynamic that is supposed to happen. The Torah does not operate in a vacuum. It's because Baruch has put us into this world, and in this world there's a dynamic in terms of truly understanding what is the correct value concept. And I'm going to point out three things. First of all is the nature of the Jewish revelation in its own right. The fundamentalist view of revelation is don't think. You should be totally passive. Right? In other words, you don't ask any questions. This unfortunately was the viewpoint of many people. Don't ask any questions. The perception being that of a sponge. Okay, and it's actually stated that there's four different types of students. One type of student is a sponge, and you would think the sponge is the best type of student, the one who takes in everything. If the teacher is giving over pure gospel, here I go back and forth in terms of my analogies here, but pure gospel, then your job is to take it in and not ask any questions, which is really the fundamentalist viewpoint. You don't really want to ask questions. Fact is that if you don't ask any questions in the Jewish perspective, you're going to miss the story. Because it seems to be that the only way to understand Torah is through asking questions. You have to think in order to understand the Torah. So really, right off the bat, you have a revelation where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling you right off the revelation, and if you're just going to sit there and be a sponge, you're going to miss the message. Because the questions are necessary to get to the next level of understanding the message. Therefore, you have to be a thinking individual. You have to question. So that already means that you're out there in the world and you're looking at the world and so forth and so forth. So if you start seeing a value being expressed by someone in the world and you say, gee, it looks good to me, well, because of your analysis, well, your analysis has value. And you are supposed to be a thinking person. And the only way you can understand Torah is by being a thinking person. Okay, now, there's an interesting place that some people learn this from. Okay, there's a remarkable question in the Chumash. Okay, we have two models of Avraham Avinu that are contradictory. One is Stom and one is the Akedah. By Stom, right, and you think about the language over there. God says, I can't do this with Avram's okay. Okay? And God comes out, listen, Avram, do you think it's okay for me to go destroy stone? Well, the answer is, hey God, if you think it's okay, I think it's okay. Right? No, I have to make sure. God says, I want to make sure that Abraham thinks it's okay. In other words, I have to meet Abraham's analysis. Not enough that I know it, Abraham has to know that it's justice. And Abraham goes through this analysis. Okay, and challenges God. So God challenges God where the idea is I have to understand. Then we have the Akedah. God says, go kill your son. Right away. No questions asked. The fact is that's not so easy. There's midrashim on that whole story. Oh, there's midrashim that say that Sarah Imenus was furious with Avram. I don't get it. For those blankety blanks in the storm, he's fighting. Hey, maybe you shouldn't kill them. For your own son, the tzaddik, Yitzchak, Avinu, you don't open your mouth? So supposedly there's midrash would say she was very furious about this. Okay. So the fact is that there is something that happens. The minute the whole event is over, Avram asks God a question. He says, I don't get it. You told me from Yitzchak will be my children, and from my Zerah, will come from Yitzchak, and they tell me to kill him. Now, how was that going to happen? And they're going to kill him. So Kodesh Baruch Hu says, It doesn't tell you. I didn't tell you to kill him. I told you to put him up on the mizbeach. Halelu sham la'olah. So the fact is that there's. I think it's basically what someone says over there, that this is the introduction to halachic analysis. Avram, when he was first told about the Akedah, said, "Okay, I got to do what God tells me. That's what I'm going to have to do." What God told him at the end is, this is the question you should have asked. If you don't analyze my halachic statements, you're going to miss the point. Splitting hairs is demanded in Judaism. Okay? You're supposed to split hairs. And if you don't split hairs, you're going to miss the real command. And that's what someone says over there by the Akedah, that if you don't, that Avram would have been wrong to sacrifice if he was just commanded to put him on the mizbeach. So you have to know exactly what the command is, and that demands your mind. Therefore, the first thing that happens in looking at the world is you have to be active. You have to be an active intelligence. We don't want you just to be passive. And therefore, what's happening in the world is something you're going to gain knowledge from, and so forth. Therefore, if you have a reaction like we talked about last week with Skokie, it says, "Hey, it doesn't seem right that I have this, that I apply this value in this world. I'm going to turn around and reject that value. I have problems with that." So forth. Well, then that's a good question. You can't just be a fundamentalist and say, "Well, this is it." Okay, so that's one thing. Okay, so that's first of all, that we have to be active, and therefore we have to analyze. Now, there is also something else, and that is this external value system that we're living in. There's a certain aspect of whether it has value. Okay, so an analysis can raise questions, and we have a personal value from it, but the fact is, does it really have value? And there are two things in our analysis that seems to arise the fact that we actually are supposed to consider a value in external value systems. There's this Torah, and then it's existing in the external value system, and there's some aspects about this external value system that we actually are supposed to consider even in our following of Torah. The first one is the concept of Chilul Hashem. Okay? What's a Chilul Hashem? The colloquial Chilul Hashem. What's a Chilul Hashem?
I know what it means, but it's hard to say.
Okay.
Chilul Hashem is embarrassing God in front of other people.
Okay. Okay.
Or unsanctifying God.
Unsanctifying God. How do you do that? What's a Chilul Hashem? Okay, so I brought in, and I'm glad it's difficult for people to find Chilul Hashem. I brought in an old article of mine, I guess from 1996.
They're doing it in a very in public.
Okay, that's called Defining a Chilul Hashem. Okay, and and for the people on KosherTube, this can be found on the Nishma website. Okay, in the updates, in the library section is update 5756 number 1, inquiry defining Chilul Hashem. The colloquial understanding of Chilul Hashem is that you basically did something that other people look upon as negative. That's a colloquial idea. Chilul Hashem, it's like, and a lot of times it's the world out there. If you do this, like that case, like the case yesterday, I saw that that the Orthodox individual who was convicted of sexual molestation was sent to life imprisonment. Okay, and I just watched CNN for a minute. I was watching CNN a little bit last night trying to get the Israeli elections. It's remarkable how much I could not find about the Israeli elections, but a little blurb there that this guy was sent away for life, and you see him, it's an ultra-Orthodox rabbi, blah, 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 and that's what people think is a Chilul Hashem. Right? Now, why is it a Chilul Hashem?
Because one expects more from him.
Who expects more from him?
The outside world.
The outside world.
Or secular Jews.
What?
Or secular Jews.
Or secular Jews. Or it just doesn't look good to the general population. In other words, somehow, and this is part of the issue that comes up in the article. Who are we concerned about? Are we concerned about Jews with the Chilul Hashem, about non-Jews? What are we really concerned about with Chilul Hashem? Okay, but are we concerned that they'll think we're not being observant? Okay, which is one view, in the sense that they'll think we're not keeping our laws. In other words, the Chilul Hashem, and there seems to be some argument for that the Chilul Hashem is we don't look like we're following our laws, but there seems to be an aspect of Chilul Hashem that we are acting in a way that doesn't look good to them. Right? In other words, somehow we're giving their perception of us some value. Okay? And therefore, in so doing, we are somehow acknowledging their view of us. In other words, their yardstick is not our yardstick. When you have a pasuk in Devarim that says, "Rak am chacham v'navon," that the nations of the world will see you as a wise and understanding people. It's wise and understanding pursuant to their yardstick. So somehow we want to be perceived as wise and understanding pursuant to their yardstick. You know, not like some kind of fundamentalist, radical Muslim says, "Of course you think I'm crazy. I don't care. I'm doing what I want." No, that's not enough for us. We want to look good in the eyes of the world, it seems. That's the concept of Chilul Hashem, or one of the concepts of Chilul Hashem, which seems to imply that we are giving value to their yardstick, and we're giving value to their value. So the question exists is what exactly, why are we giving, so we're giving value to this external value system that they have. Is that universal? Do we give value to every one of their external value systems? No. So when is it that we actually want to give value to them? So one thing we're concerned about is that the way that we don't want to look, because of some technicality, we don't want to look like we're not being true to what our laws are demanding, even though our knowledge of laws mean that we're really following them, even though they don't think we are. But the fact is, it seems to be that we are giving value to a way of looking at things. The fact is, it seems to be very clear cut that Torah Judaism accepts the fact that there really is another value system outside of Torah that also has value.
And it's supposed to be the light unto the world.
Right. So the light unto the world means us teaching them, but it also means that they have to accept us as the teachers before we come out, in order to accept us as the teachers.
And I think it also breeds anti-Semitism as well, because it's like, gee, there's good.
It breeds anti-Semitism?
The people who are anti-Semitic,
right.
To me, this is like another nail in the coffin, if you used to feel that way. This is like proof, you see. A blanket statement.
That mean the proof that
Jews are no good.
Right. Right. So that's why. But the Chilul Hashem has to be the Chilul Hashem will add to anti-Semitism.
Can you bring in the concepts here of either Noahide laws or natural law?
Yes.
That those are the things that we're considered.
Absolutely.
We're not considered about Shabbat.
Right. But the
Chilul Hashem.
Well, Chilul Hashem is an interesting aspect in terms of Shabbat, in the sense that it might be a Chilul Hashem if they think we're not being observant.
Right.
Now, in other words, if people think that good Jews don't eat bacon,
right,
and we're sort of eating bacon, it could be an aspect of Chilul Hashem on that also, if they mock you for that. But the fact is, it's generally around what you're saying about natural morality. And that really leads into the fact that there is another value system because of natural morality. Natural morality being the morality that is inherent in our rational minds. Okay, the way I'd like to see it is that we have two definitions of Tov on the surface, with a goal of some way of reconciling these two systems. It may not ever be able to be reconciled, but somehow they are to be reconciled. We have an internal value system which comes from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We have a sense of what's right and what's wrong. Now, this sense of what's right and what's wrong is referred to in the general world as natural morality. There's actually a lot of arguments, and like there's I think it's Rabbi Nishma Gaon's introduction to Shas, where he basically presents an idea that the Noahide code basically is tied to natural morality, and natural morality is basically right and wrong, and maintaining this idea of natural morality. Now, the fact is, we consider natural morality to have a voice, and it actually does have some type of say. Okay, there's a whole issue with Avram Avinu. I talked about the Akeda or stone. Rav Lichtenstein writes an article that his argument is that Avram argues that a Kodesh Baruch Hu based upon natural morality. In other words, Kodesh Baruch Hu's revelation and so forth and so forth. But where does Avram get this idea of saying Hashovet Kol Haaretz L'Yasa Mishpat, that the judge of the whole world will not do justice? Where does he get that from? Now, the truth is, my Rabbi said it's not such a strong proof because maybe he learned it from Kodesh Baruch Hu himself. But the fact is that Rav Lichtenstein says Avram had natural morality, and at some level, at some point in time, Kodesh Baruch Hu said, "Okay, I have to also, try. I want to. I don't have to, but I want to. In this case, also answer Avram's perception of natural morality." So that he understands
the natural morality when it comes to the Akeda.
That's really the question. That's really how you understand Sarah's question. So my own answer to the question is that Avram felt that once he was subject to the tzivui, he was no longer bound to natural morality, in the sense that at Stom he was an observer, so he could ask the questions. When he was in Mitzvah, someone who was commanded, he was no longer subject to this type of analysis, and that's why the example of the idea that I presented said no. You're still supposed to bring in your questions and what's your question thinking, but also your own natural morality. But what I'm trying to say is that it seems to be that there's a concept of natural morality which is a parallel system with revelational morality of Torah. Now, sometimes we have absolute contradictions between them, right? Or when we say contradictions, let's take one example is, and this is where you get into the issue of Chok and Mishpat. When the Rambam says a Chok, or the Gemara talks about a chok is a law where it's only revelational morality, and natural morality doesn't have any feeling about it. Don't eat pork. I don't know. Why not? I can't figure it out. That's one type of law. But there's mishpatim, which are supposed to work with some aspect of natural morality. And the Rambam says that with mishpatim we're supposed to develop a natural sense of it and a feeling about it. Right? Like he says in terms of eating pork, you don't feel it's bad to eat pork. You may say, hey, pork looks really good. But in terms of murdering someone, you're supposed to feel murder is wrong. So there's an idea of trying to work out this aspect of natural morality becomes another value system, and that's extremely interesting. So because it seems that we now live with two moralities. We have the Torah morality and natural morality. And in some ways we have our minds thinking, reason, and we have this concept of natural morality and revelational morality, and you put it all together, what do you get? You get the dynamic nature of Torah's study yielding the final question, the final answer. So, what?
But if you look at natural morality, is there anything in natural morality that is contradicted by Torah morality?
Okay, so that's going to be an interesting question. The fact is that Rav Lichtenstein, I mentioned that thing of Stam, he says, Avram asked a question from natural morality, and he says natural morality is where we get the idea of the Sni Meshuras Adin, of going beyond the halachic parameters, knowing what to do next. I wrote a question, I wrote him a letter, she never answered, maybe never got the letter, basically says it's very nice, but what about contradictions? What do you do with contradictions? Now the truth is that contradictions is now one of the issues that are existing today. Okay, that really is the world we're working in today. Contradictions. For democracy and a Jewish state. Okay, full democracy means giving everyone on the land one vote. But that would be problematic in terms of having a Jewish state. It's our land. Now the truth is you also see another contradiction. You know, the first Rashi in Chumash he basically uses natural morality. First Rashi in Chumash is, why does the Kodesh Baruch Hu tell us begin the Torah with gracious, right? And his answer is because the nations of the world are going to say you're a bunch of thieves, and we're going to say, wait a second, no, we aren't. God created the world, and He can give it to whoever He wants to. Now, that Rashi needs a lot more analysis. Was questioning needs analysis, and that needs analysis. But Rashi's saying, well, the Goyim are asking you, you're thieves. Who cares? Go away. No. Because we know there's a problem with theft. And if you look at the language of Rashi, he quotes a verse that says, Koach Masav Higid La'amo Lateit Lehem Nachlat Goyim. It's the strength of his actions tells his nation. We're supposed to ask the question. Well, maybe it is theft. Oh, it's not theft because Baruch Hu gave it to us. But we're supposed to ask those questions. Now, you're asking the question of whether there's issues of contradiction. That's going to be a powerful question. The fact is that in certain ways, if it's not a contradiction, you obviously have a lot of motivation out of it. See, a lot of halachic analysis comes out of motivation. You take the situation of a guna. Okay? There's a tremendous amount of force in halacha to always find a heter for an aguna. Okay? A lot of it comes from the fact that you don't want this woman not be able to get remarried, and therefore there's a certain sensitivity. There's halachic arguments for that, but it comes also from a natural morality, and a lot of issues like that. So the fact is, natural morality, I think, has a major role in the Shalos and Tshuvas forum, in the sense that there's a certain sense of what we think is right and wrong, and therefore, obviously, halacha says it. This is the halacha. There's nothing you can do about it. Okay, but that's because we live with the question. Ultimately, we live with insufficient answers. Moshe Rabbeinu's question of Tzaddik v'Ra, he didn't have an answer. So we learned to say, hey, listen, we're bound to what the Kodesh Baruch Hu tells us through the halacha, even though we may not understand it. But the truth is that what happens through a lot of shalos and tshuvas are attempt to try and understand the halacha, and a lot of it comes from motivations of things. Hey, we got to do something about this. Now, there would also be Torah support to some of these natural morality ideas to push you forward. But the fact is that someone comes to you in a certain sense, and by the way, this is one of the major issues in our world today, because you have issues with same-sex marriages. You have part of the issue is natural morality going through a change? Is this natural morality? Is it not? How do you deal with it? How do you understand this? It's so contradictory to not just Jewish law. Homosexual act is forbidden to non-Jews as well under the Noahide code, and therefore there's a lot of midrashim approach these issues from what would seem to be a reasoned natural morality concepts, and from what the world thought and so forth, and challenge it that way, and therefore you have this issue, and now the world's going through a change. How do you deal with it? But the fact is that it becomes not just how do you deal with it pragmatically, it becomes a more intense issue, because we have given some type of value. If you give some type of value to this natural morality, not to say that every form of what is perceived moral in the world today is correct, but if you have seen this idea of natural morality, then you have this issue with responding, because natural morality cannot just be discounted. Because there is a concept of Torah of giving recognition that there's a value of natural morality.
So it seems like a lot of controversies today are answered by poskim by trying to find heterim that are closer to natural morality than they are to Torah.
Well, not necessarily. See, I wouldn't say closer to Torah.
Like,
you have different approaches.
For example, a Kohen married to
what happens is I would not say that they're closer to Torah. I wouldn't say it's I wouldn't say they're not closer to Torah. The argument opens up new ideas in Torah. See, the point is that Torah is a very dynamic system, and as you ask questions, you get better understanding of what the Torah system is about. So you see the words like heterim, stuff like that. They seem to imply that this is the way to get around the law, but I would not define it that way. I would say that all these questions raise new issues in how to understand the law, and after the conclusion, a real posek, when you really work with a posek, a question may emerge because of some moral perception that there's a problem here. But when you get into the posek's analysis of the sources, and after they go through the sources, okay, in the end, you look at it and you end up saying that really is the correct understanding of the sources. It's not just the fact that, it's sometimes... This, by the way, I think is one of the major differences between conservative Judaism and true psak, from a halakhic perspective. I think conservative Judaism, in certain ways, they tried to do this, and they tried to find any way of reading a source, even a roundabout way like this, and say, we can read the source like this, and therefore we can say it fits within the system. And you look at it and say, wait a second, that reading the source is totally inappropriate. But if you really read a really good posek's analysis of the sources, you find out that the question raised new questions. What I usually find out is that the way I usually find it in terms of psak is almost like a step. You follow the halacha. Something comes up that really challenges you because of some moral perception or some other idea. Actually, it may be not just natural morality, it may be another Torah concept that's also challenged. And then you say, hey, how does this work? Then you go back into the sources, and then what you find is a problem in the language itself. And you look at the language and say, gee whiz, you know something? I'm now motivated to look at the language. I look at the language and I say, you know something? This language, when I'm really looking at it, really has questions on it. And then you walk away, and even if the moral questions fall off, you're still bothered by the language. And then you walk away, and then you find out, well, an answer of a posek that comes back and says, you know something? That's a much better way of understanding the language. And it just so happens it also solves the moral dilemma. That's a really great psak. And you see this in terms of Gemaras. See this all the time. The really great poskim. I see a question emerge, and then I've seen, let's say, some of Ramosha Feinstein's, most powerful psaks, and totally innovative. And you know that he's bothered by that there's something bothers him in his analysis and so forth in the world, and there's issues and so forth, greater issues. But then you go back to the sources, just the simple concept of what Torah is saying, and what you found out is all the things that are going on around him open up new vistas of Torah. You saw new problems in the sources, and you came up with new understanding of the sources. And in the conclusion, you're wondering how anyone could have read this any way differently beforehand. It's so obvious that the language is supportive of those ideas. That's a really great posting. Well, and again, in conservative Judaism, they really worked the other way. It was almost like, and I've seen it. They say, hey, that's not, like I've seen, if you read, and this is from years ago, conservative Judaism has gone through a change, but if you read their response, let's say, 60, 70 years ago, right? And I've seen some of their arguments. And I've seen this argument like this, and their tshuvas. I can give you one of their tshuvas, and you think it was a regular tshuva, quoting this Rishon and that Achron and stuff like that. And I look it up, and I look up the actual language of the Rishon or Achron, and I said, that's not what he said. You're reading it like this to fit into your desired idea. That's not what he said. But then if you look at a tshuva of Ramosha, for example, look at tshuva of Ramosha. In the end, gee, that really is what the Rishon is saying. So it's very powerful, but a lot of it But the point here is comes out to that there's a sense of this natural morality, and therefore, what I'm trying to say is there's a dynamic relationship for us as human beings. We have reasoned morality. We are thinking. We're analysis. So in the world today, democracy, freedom of religion, the issues all these people are analyzing things, coming up with conclusions, so forth and so forth, and that you can simply just dismiss it, say, hey, it's nothing to do with Torah, or you sit there and say, wait a second. I'm not saying I agree with even the conclusions of what they're saying is moral, but what I'm saying is that there's analysis in that world, and I can't just discount it. And the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created us is with a parallel value system to Torah that's supposed to create a dynamic that makes us have a greater understanding of Torah. And therefore, there's a greater thought and so forth, and that yields a conclusion. So in our world today, there is these developments happening in this natural morality system. Okay. One thing I do want to say though is you have to understand. Therefore, what I'm doing is I'm creating a world of our environment which cannot just be discounted. It's not just a pragmatic issue; it also becomes a theoretical issue. But I want to make one point clear: is that the challenge has to be revelation, it has to be reason. You have to be careful about another revelational morality. Okay, in the sense that this is a big difference today. And we'll talk a little bit more about the freedom of religion. This is a big difference today from let's say Catholic Spain, when they're arguing from revelational morality, and there was a major argument between Rav Moshe and a Rabbi Breitsch, who was a Rav in Switzerland. Rav Moshe muttered artificial insemination by a non-husband donor. Okay, it's a famous tshuva Rav Moshe. Now, if you actually read the tshuva, he basically put up enough safeguards to basically think that no woman should ever do it. He basically did not think it was a good idea to do it, just for the husband-wife relationship, for raising a child. So he did not advocate that it was a good idea for a woman to get impregnated by someone else's sperm. However, from a halachic perspective, he said that this would not be usher. Okay, that was Rav Moshe's famous answer. Response by a lot of the frum world was very powerful. They were burning effigies of Rav Moshe in the Satmar community. They were very, very upset. This Rabbi Breitsch challenged Rav Moshe in his answer, and he said to him, "How could you do this? The Catholic Church said artificial insemination is wrong, and we're not looking as devoted as religious as we're not looking as devoted as religious as the Catholic Church." Okay, and he quoted a Gemara in support of it. He quoted a Gemara that no laws that there's. He quoted Gemara, for example, if a person becomes from a non-Jew to a Jew, the Jewish laws are always more stringent, and you should not let a non-Jew be allowed to do something as a Jew, which they were not allowed to do as a non-Jew. You don't go from Kucha Kala to Kucha Chamura. It should always get leniencies. So this guy quoted it to him. He also quoted him a statement from the Sefer Hasidim. Sefer Hasidim basically says that if non-Jews don't eat a certain food, even if that food is kosher, you shouldn't eat it. Because if the non-Jews don't think it's good to eat it, you shouldn't eat it. So he says, see, the non-Jews adopt a moral practice, Jews should not adopt that moral practice. Rav Moshe basically went after this guy and said, since when do I care what the Pope says about Judaism? Okay? Now, obviously, what did Rav Moshe say? So Rav Moshe basically said, that statement in the Gemara is talking about Torah concepts. Okay? It's saying that a Torah law that is from the Seven Mitzvot B'nai Noach, that a non-Jew can't do because the Seven Mitzvot B'nai Noach, right? If they convert, they're not allowed to do it. We have to be careful about that, because it looks within our systems, the Noachide laws and the Torah laws, it's problematic. And in the second case, he makes an interesting point that statement of Sefer Hasidim is not talking about morality; it's talking about disgusting. In other words, if non-Jews don't eat something because they think it's gross to eat this food, even though that's food kosher, we shouldn't do it. But he's not saying they don't eat it because it's immoral. They don't eat it because they think it's gross. Okay, and he argues this from the sources that are around it, and he says, look at what's around it. But he basically says, but what is Rav Moshe really talking about? The way I understand Rav Moshe is that he's saying that what the Catholic Church says, based upon their perception of a revelation, I don't care about. I'm not caring about every non-Jew's perception. If the Catholic Church thinks it's really pious to be something else, it's really pious to be a celibate nun, whatever it is, I don't have to care about it. But what I maintain here is something comes out of what we think is reasoned morality, and there's enough sources that seem to imply with Torah saying we accept that there is such a thing as reasoned morality, as natural morality. We talk it as we didn't seichel. Okay, there's mipia shmua, mipia seichel, that there's a concept of right and wrong, mipia seichel, from our minds, that we have to consider. So therefore, in our discussion here, when we're working in this secular environment, this secular environment has developed certain consciousness, and therefore there's a pragmatic way of how we're going to navigate it. But there's also, it's understood that in that terms of navigation, it also has to be somewhat of a dynamic, not chas v'shalom against Torah, but understanding that a lot of these analyses open up new perceptions in Torah, and therefore it becomes more of a dynamic. And I think that's where Chilul Hashem, I've had some of the articles here, but that's where I think Chilul Hashem ties into it. Okay? Okay, and you guys can take that. It's okay. Thank you.